Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be ranking all 22 episodes of The Walking Dead Season 10 from the worst to the best. So we've already done this for all prior Walking Dead seasons. I have a playlist somewhere on this channel. I did them a while ago though, so they're definitely older videos on the channel, probably from about like almost a year ago. It's been a long time since I've done this, but of course I wanted to wait till Season 10 was all finished with all 22 episodes before we go ahead and rank them. I also plan on ranking my top 25 favorite episodes of the entire series at some point within the next week or two. Maybe we'll do top 10 worst episodes. Maybe we'll do best characters. I don't know. I've got a lot of ranking videos I'd love to do for The Walking Dead. Let me know what you'd like to see in the comment section below. But there's a lot of episodes this season, so we're not going to spend too much time talking about each individual episode because we'd be here forever. I have reviews for every single Season 10 episode at some place on either this channel or my other channel, so definitely if you want to see more in-depth views on each of these episodes, you can definitely see those for yourself. So let's start with the worst episode of Season 10, and honestly, I think it's the worst episode of the entire series, and that's obviously episode 21, which was titled Diverged. So this episode was the Carol and Daryl, like, I guess it's just activity episode. That's all they really do. It's a day in the life type thing where Carol's just trying to make soup and dealing with a rat problem. There's a little rat in the house. She's trying to get it out, and she's also just dealing with this internal conflict of, okay, she just got in this big fight with Daryl, and she doesn't really like having conflict just be there. You know, there's stuff bothering her about that situation. And then Daryl's out and about trying to fix his motorcycle. And that's the whole episode. In terms of directing and acting, and there's even some pretty good music in this episode as well, that's all well and fine. Like, that's not bad necessarily, but the episode is just, it's pointless. It doesn't need to be there. There's no reason for it to even be in the show. I understand it's a bonus episode, but a lot of the other bonus episodes at least did some good stuff for the story for a lot of different characters. Like, I mean, look at the recent episode with Here's Negan, a lot of good character stuff there. This didn't even feel like it developed Daryl and Carol at all. I think you could have easily have skipped this episode, and it wouldn't make like any difference for the story at all. You could easily skip it. And I don't say that about like any other episode. I really don't think any other episode you could completely skip. This one I think you could, really. That's just how pointless it was. It was kind of boring as well. The only thing keeping me at least semi-interested in it is the fact that it's The Walking Dead. I love Daryl, I love Carol. Of course, I'm gonna want to watch them on screen, but when they're doing boring stuff that's not really affecting the plot or their individual stories, I just don't care as much, and that's kind of the issue I had with this episode. Coming in the 21st spot, I've got episode 20, which was called Splinter, which just came right before episode 21, and I didn't like this episode that much either. Now, I definitely think it was at least a little bit more useful because it kind of introduced the Commonwealth a little bit, not really. I really was hoping they would do more with the Commonwealth here, but they really didn't. They had like one or two conversations with like one or two soldiers from the Commonwealth. Felt very small. There really wasn't much going on there. And it was basically just Princess going kind of crazy for 40 minutes. That's the whole episode. If you really like Princess's character, you're probably going to like this episode a lot more than I did. I like Princess's character. I don't love her character, at least so far. So it was kind of hard for me to feel very connected to what was going on. I thought it was good development for her character, for sure. But when 95% of the episode was just hallucinations, it feels really unnecessary, and it didn't really push the main story forward in that significant of a way, so I just didn't really like the episode that much. And then coming in the 20th spot, I've got episode 15, which was called The Tower. So this one I was really disappointed by because I was really hoping we would be seeing some awesome like field battles for the Whisper War like we saw in the comics, and then we get some other battles in the finale. But episode 15 had really nothing to it. It was another episode that didn't really feel like it pushed the story forward that much. This is when the whole conflict with this final, like, outing against the Whisperers was kind of starting a little bit. The Whisperers brought their whole horde to Alexandria, but everyone was already gone at the hospital. They kind of skipped a decent amount from episode 14 to 15 and just kind of had it so they were already at this safe place, whereas the Walkers all came into Alexandria. I still think it would have been a lot cooler if they were still in Alexandria when the Walkers came in. They could have had some really epic, like, No Way Out type thing go down. It could have been really cool, but budget's probably the reason they didn't do that. I really doubt story was the reason they didn't do that. I really refuse to believe that the story is the reason why they do certain things that they do. You know what I mean? I think if they had a bigger budget, they would have brought more action to this episode. They would have made it a little bit crazier and, you know, intense and crazy, because this is the war. It's the Whisper War. We should have gotten some cooler stuff, but Episode 15 was kind of just more character development for a couple of different characters. Definitely very princess involved as well, which it was her first like actual episode. She was slightly introduced in the prior episode, and she was definitely in this episode more, and I thought she was a pretty interesting character in it, but they were doing a lot of weird stuff with her, with just her taking them in circles around that little city that they were in because she just didn't want to lose them. She wanted to hang around with them, but that kind of felt like a waste of time though. Like, I get they're trying to develop her character, but then again, seeing our characters go around in circles gets kind of boring. And then the stuff with the other characters, not really much happened. You had Beta find Alpha's head on the pike, which was kind of cool, but there wasn't much to this episode. There really wasn't. I think that's my main problem with it. Didn't really feel like it pushed the story forward. And coming in number 19th spot, I've got episode 9, which was titled Squeeze. So my biggest problem with this episode is how dark it is. It is so dark, and not in the good way. I like a good dark episode, but it was like literally dark. Like, you could not see shit the whole episode because it was in this cave. And people were trying to defend this episode saying, oh, that's the point. It's supposed to feel claustrophobic. It's supposed to feel scary. That's why it's dark for even the audience. That's not a good filmmaking technique at all. You want your people who are watching it to know what's going on. Like, unless they have a deliberate reason for not wanting us to see what's happening, fine. But that wasn't the case at all. There was a scene where Magna got attacked by a whisper in the caves. I think 90% of the viewers said, what the fuck just happened? Like, that was me at least. I literally could not tell what was going on, especially if you weren't watching it on a very good TV. Maybe you're watching it in bad lighting or something. I don't know. It was even harder to tell what's happening for the majority of the episode. They could have lit it up better. It could have definitely been an episode that could have been easier to see if they just changed around a few different things. But even when it comes to just the story, I didn't find it all that intriguing, to be honest. They were just stuck in this cave that they foolishly got stuck in by the last episode, and that was the whole episode. I was like, why? Why is this a thing? Why are we doing this? They could have done some really cool stuff with it. They could have, but I feel like they didn't really take advantage of it. There was a couple cool sequences in the cave for sure, but they didn't take advantage of it, I feel like, to the extent that I kind of think they could have. But the stuff I did like about this episode was the Negan and Alpha stuff. I know people thought that stuff was weird. Was a little weird. They were, making out. Probably had sex. I think they did, but off screen. Weird, but I liked their dialogues prior to that. I think they had some good scenes together. And especially after seeing Here's Negan, it makes me kind of understand why Negan was attached to Alpha in the first place in the way that he was. So I thought it was pretty interesting. That was the only really highlight of the episode for me personally. And then coming in number 18th spot, I actually have episode 18, which was titled Find Me. So this was another Daryl and Carol episode in the bonus episodes, and it focused primarily, or actually no, it focused only on Daryl and Carol and their kind of like backstory that Daryl had in between the time jump with this character named Leah. Now, at the time, I thought the episode was, fine and all, but looking back on it, I didn't really think it was that great. It depends on what they do with the story going forward. If they have this Leah character return and she's really important to the story and important mainly for Daryl's character, I could definitely appreciate the episode a lot more. But if they completely drop this story and they have Connie come back and they don't even talk about Leah again, I will never understand the point of this episode at all. So it really just depends what they do in the future. That's this episode's solely dependent on that. But as it is currently, it wasn't that entertaining of an episode. I'm not a big fan of the romance storylines in The Walking Dead anyways, only if they push the story forward. But if they don't push the story forward, I usually don't really care that much about them. There's certain relationships that do push the story forward. Glenn and Maggie, for sure. Rick and Michonne, for sure. Ezekiel and Carol, for sure. Even Lydia and Henry push the story forward in a specific way. But I really don't feel like Daryl needs a relationship. Unless it actually does something for his character, then I'm down for it. But I don't know what they're planning on doing. And as it is currently, the episode didn't really do that much for me. Had some cool shots, had some cool directing, but that's really all I can say about it. And some good acting. Every episode is good acting. That's not really even a compliment anymore because I can say it about basically every episode because the actors in the show are phenomenal. Coming number 17th spot, I've got episode 7, which was titled Open Your Eyes. So I had a negative reaction to this episode, and I feel like most people had more of a positive reaction. This might be an unpopular opinion to put this episode this low. I didn't really dig this episode that much. It had some cool stuff. I think some of the Sadiq PTSD stuff was interesting. It was well directed, but I felt like it was repetitive. We saw Sadiq going through these PTSD episodes over and over and over again in the first couple episodes of season 10, and I was getting like tired of it to a certain degree. And some of the sequences were just weird. Like they didn't really explain them. Like there was one where Sadiq just woke up with, I think he was with Coco, and he was just like on a windmill, and I was like, what? Like I don't think it really made any sense. I don't even know if the writers understood what it meant. I don't know, but I feel like they were kind of repeating that over and over again, and I was getting to a point where it was like, do we really need all of this? I don't know. But then they decided to obviously kill off Sadiq going forward later on towards the end of the episode, and that was a really interesting decision to me. I didn't know if I liked it at the time, but as time went on, I think the twist was good. It was a surprising twist. It wasn't something that was that predictable, although a lot of people predicted it, for sure. There was also a decent amount of people who definitely did not predict that. I think maybe a lot of people who predicted it might have been looking at spoilers. I'm not too sure. Because honestly, I didn't see it coming at all. When it happened, I was very surprised, which just because it's surprising and shocking does not automatically make it good, but for what it was, I kind of liked it. I did. And I thought it made for an interesting death, but did Sadiq's death really push the story forward that much? I don't know. You know, I guess for certain characters, for Gabriel and Rosita to a degree, but that's really it. I don't think any other characters were necessarily developed from Sadiq's death, but Sadiq wasn't a huge character in the first place, so I think it fits his character to die like that, and I was kind of okay with it. You also had some stuff with Daryl and Carol dealing with this whisperer that they captured from the previous episode, and that was kind of interesting. And then some weird stuff happened with Lydia, where Lydia left. I didn't like that whole part where Lydia left because Carol was bringing Lydia to kind of use her as bait, and then Lydia got all pissed and just left and said, "You're worse." Or said, "You're just as bad as Alpha." And I was like, what? I get what she's coming from, but you're gonna leave them behind because she was trying to actually do a pretty smart plan. It was a weird character decisions in this episode, a couple of weird character decisions that I wasn't a big fan of. But like I said, I do like the whole twist with Sadiq and Dante, so that was decent. Coming in number 16th spot, I've got episode 2, which was titled We Are the End of the World. This episode was a pretty interesting episode for sure. I just didn't find it all that enjoyable. I think it would have been cooler if the Whisperer backstory was more involved with the actual Whispers themselves, but instead it was more about specifically Beta and Alpha's relationship between each other, not necessarily the start of the Whispers themselves. And I think it would have been cooler if they kind of started showing how they got people to join them and such. And then they also had stuff in this episode with Gamma and such, which Gamma's a character that I thought they were doing some pretty cool stuff with, but then they killed her off later on, and I still don't get why, but we'll get into that later. As a character, I thought Gamma, though, was pretty interesting here and how they're utilizing her in the present scenes, and then the past scenes with, Alpha and Beta. I enjoyed them. I thought Beta was really, really cool in this episode. He was almost like a Jason Voorhees type, where he had the bag over his face and he was just all over the place, and you kind of started learning about his character a little bit more, and you learn, why he gets the specific, skin that he gets. That was the skin from the person that he was, I think it was one of his friends, or I'm pretty sure it was his friend. I don't think it was his brother, right? It was his friend. But there, he took off the face and then put it on. That was all cool. I enjoyed that, but the episode itself, because it was solely focused on the villains, and I feel like it didn't do that much for the villain story, because we already learned about Alpha's backstory last season, and I enjoyed that. But this is more about Beta's backstory, but it didn't really do much for Beta's backstory. I don't think it really did, because it's not like, it doesn't show us how Beta became that type of a person. You know what I mean? We don't really see that. So I didn't think it pushed the story forward that much. And also, it was pretty slow of an episode, I gotta say. Coming to the 15th spot, I've got episode 8, actually, the mid-season finale, which is titled The World Before. Really strange to put a mid-season finale this low. Usually mid-season finales are some of the best episodes of the season, but this mid-season finale was kind of lackluster. I really didn't find it to be that entertaining for a number of reasons, but it had some cool stuff. My favorite scene in the whole episode had to have been when Father Gabriel killed Dante. I was hoping to see more of Dante because Dante was pretty cool of a character. I was hoping there would be something they would do with him going forward, but it was a really cool scene, so I was completely fine with it, and it did something really interesting for Gabriel's character, to the point where Gabriel's one of my favorite characters now, because he's really been just die hard recently, man. Especially in episode 19, which we'll get to a little bit later. He's been just going off, man, like non-stop killing, and I really like that scene where he just said screw it. He's like, I don't even give a shit. Like, we probably should have a council meeting and decide whether or not we should kill you or banish you or whatever, but he's like, screw it. He just starts stabbing him with a knife. Great scene. great scene. But the rest of the episode, for a mid-season finale, it was like, what? Nothing happened really. So you had Michonne, Judith, and I believe Luke, someone else was there, I think, too. They went to Oceanside, obviously, because they were trying to, talk with Oceanside about this whole issue, that because they, saw that or they're hearing about whispers or whatever nearby. And Michonne essentially ends up leaving on this boat to go see this Virgil guy who comes across the community, because it wasn't actually Whisper, it was just Virgil. And that stuff was interesting later on, but in this episode itself, I was like, okay, sure. It was alright. Wasn't anything too crazy, especially for a mid-season finale. But then the stuff at Alexandria, I didn't have much of an attachment to it. You had some stuff with Rosita just kind of being reckless and Eugene talking to her and such. And reckless characters work sometimes, but when it gets a little too obsessive, it kind of gets annoying more than intriguing. Carol was being reckless too when they went out to go look for the Horde. Obviously, Carol just got reckless when she saw Alpha and ran after her, and then stupidly got stuck in a cave. Everyone stupidly got stuck in the cave. I still don't know how that was possible. How do you fall into a cave, and then the person behind you goes up, falls in that cave as well? You'd think a person would start to realize, okay, maybe we shouldn't run that way anymore because people are falling down a cave. So maybe we should just take a step back and not follow them. I don't know how that happened, but I think my biggest issue is that, yes, it was a mid-season finale, and I know we shouldn't really treat them differently, but we kind of have to. That's how our expectations work. We expect them to be a little bit more flamboyant. Is flamboyant the right word? That is definitely not the right word for that at all. A little bit more, bigger, a little bit more sizable. I just didn't feel like this episode did that for me, so that's kind of why I would put it this low. And coming to the 14th spot, I've got the season premiere, which was episode 1, Lines We Cross. This was a solid premiere. I think it did what a premiere needs to do usually, and I say this about every premiere. Premieres should just introduce you back to The Walking Dead, get you invested in what's going on, not necessarily do crazy things. Sometimes you can do crazy things, like 701, for example. If it's coming off a really big cliffhanger, you might have to do something crazy. But for the most part, I think premieres' main objective is just get you back into the Walking Dead universe, introduce you to some new stories that are going to going forward. That's really it. This episode did a great job with that. Introduced a couple new characters, like Dante was introduced in this one, so new character that we're going to see going forward in the next couple episodes. That was good. Introduced a new story going on with this whole Whisper. Obviously there's the border, they can't cross it, but they have to because of the satellite that falls down, and then Eugene's like, bro, this can start a forest fire, we have to get it, we have to take it out. That all was really interesting, and I liked it. At the end of the day, though, the episode was still not a big, huge episode that I think would rival the episodes going above it. I think starting with this one, this is when I start to say these episodes are good. Every episode below this was either just average or below average. Every episode going forward here, I would say, is at least a good episode, and then we get to some of the better ones going up. But yeah, Lines We Cross, this was a good one. I enjoyed it. I don't really have many complaints other than maybe some minor things I could probably pick out here and there, but as a whole, definitely a solid episode. I think the stuff with the fire in the woods with the satellite was definitely the most interesting stuff, them trying to take that thing out. And then obviously later on, Alpha actually finds out what happens. In the ending scene, when Alpha's seeing Carol up there, that's one of the coolest shots in the entire series. So I really did enjoy how that kind of hyped up the future episodes, which unfortunately didn't really pan out the way I was hoping it would, because yeah, but whatever. Let's get into the rest of them. Number 13th spot is going to be episode 3, which was titled Ghosts. So this one kind of followed up the first episode, because episode 2 obviously was kind of like a in-between bottle episode type of a deal. This was directly following up what happened, and Alpha was obviously pissed. She sees Carol and she's like, shit, we're gonna have a problem here. And that's when they had this little meeting, and the meeting scene was awesome, where they met at the border, and Alpha was just like, yeah, we need to move our border further into your land because you guys aren't listening. And obviously they don't want to agree with that, but Michonne's like, we kind of have to, there's really no other choice. Carol's all pissy. That's all cool. Where the episode falls flat for me, though, that all before in the beginning was amazing. That's what holds it up. But what falls flat for me is later on in the episode, when they start to get to the stuff at, I think they were at a school. They were just kind of holding up there for a little bit, and Carol just has this weird like hallucination thing going on. I get so frustrated with the hallucinations in the show because they do them all the time. And Some of it was hallucination, some of it wasn't though, because obviously she wasn't sleeping like at all. So I thought that was interesting how it was, it was kind of happening because she just wasn't sleeping. And then she finds this weird trap she gets stuck in, and there's like this walker attack, which was an interesting scene, although another one of those cases of they just skip over all the action because they did that. They skipped over her killing like all the walkers pretty much. I don't know why they do that, but they did that, and she got out safely. And I was okay with the idea of it, but it just felt repetitive. That's my issue. It's just repetitive. Hallucinations are very repetitive in the show. They just don't stop doing them. And I didn't really want to see them, especially with Carol again and again. We see them later on with Carol as well, which it's just like, bro, calm down with the hallucinations. But this is a good episode. It was good mainly for the first half. That's the point of the episode where I was very invested in what was happening. That's why I think this episode deserved at least some credit, in my opinion. Coming number 12 spots, I've got episode 17, which was titled Home Sweet Home. So this was the first of the bonus episodes, and I definitely enjoyed it a decent amount when it first came out, especially mainly for the Maggie stuff. Everything with Maggie in this episode was fantastic. Obviously, seeing her back was the best part. The highlights, just the dialogue between her and the other characters was all great. But the rest of the episode, I mean, there were some decent moments here and there. I thought it was cool with how they kind of set up this whole Reaper character, or Reaper group, and there's one character within that group who was kind of sniping at them. But it kind of ended weirdly. It was very awkward how it ended, especially with how he blew himself up, and then for some reason they were all safe even though they were like 2 feet away from him. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with the Reaper storyline going forward in Season 11. If they do some interesting stuff with it, I can definitely say this episode will be a lot better just because of that, but depends what they do with these characters. But I do really like a lot of the new characters that were introduced, like, of course, Elijah. I mean, we don't really get to learn much about him, but for what we did see, it was cool. And, of course, the other character, I forget the guy's name, but he was interesting. It was like basically a bootleg Walmart Jesus in a way. Actually, he looked more like Jesus than Jesus did, actually, so I don't know. Maybe he's cooler than that. But I enjoyed watching both their characters on screen. A couple cool scenes with Kelly. I'm not the biggest fan of Kelly's character. I really never have been, but still cool to see her. I just want to see Connie come back, honestly, but don't know if she will. Just to get that storyline kind of figured out in its way. And then you had some stuff with obviously little baby Herschel. They come across. He's not a baby anymore, I guess, but you come across Herschel, or Maggie does, and we get to have a scene with him as well. And then it ends with them returning back to Alexandria. So not a lot happened in this episode for sure. A lot of these bonus episodes, that's the biggest issue with them. Just not a lot happens. But for what we did get here, especially with Maggie, I thought it was good. Coming in the number 11th spots, I've got episode 19, which was titled One More, another one of the bonus episodes. This was the Aaron and Gabriel bonus episode where Aaron and Gabriel were kind of going to this little place just looking for supplies. And for the first half of the episode, I was enjoying it mainly because I like these characters, having them talk to each other, have a lot of cool, interesting, funny, realistic dialogue. It was good. I like that. But then the episode got really good once we got to the point with this new character named Mace, whatever his name was, Robert Patrick. Let's just say Robert Patrick. So he's here, and they could have done cooler stuff with him, I think, but for what they did do, I was okay with it. It was mainly for Gabriel's development, it seems, for the most part, because his dialogue back and forth with Robert Patrick's character was the most important, how they were kind of debating the whole idea of religion and what it means to be, what human nature is. Very deep themes in this episode, which I really liked. And this Russian roulette game, I didn't really feel the tension there in the Russian roulette game at all because we knew they were going to live. So I don't think anyone really thought they were going to die there. But it was still a cool scene nonetheless. And this part where Gabriel just takes the malice or mace, whatever the hell you call it, from Aaron's arm thing and just knocks it beside the head of Robert Patrick's character was pretty interesting and shocking. And I think kind of works, especially if they weren't going to keep him around anyways. You might as well kill him off in a good way that develops the character, and it did. And then they find his brother, and his brother killed himself. So some pretty cool stuff all around. It wasn't the biggest, most developing episode ever for the whole story, but for a bonus episode, it worked, and I definitely liked it more than a lot of the other episodes this season. So yeah, Now we're getting into the top 10. These 10 episodes I would consider to be getting a little bit higher. You know, they're definitely above the good, you know, point of view, but they're not all amazing. No, I really don't think season 10 has that many amazing episodes. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is, but it's got a lot of, you know, definitely, these are all above like 7 out of 10s, and then the ones a bit higher, like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, and such. But number 10, I'm going to give to the kind of season finale. Wasn't really the season finale, but in a way it was. Episode 16, A Certain Doom. So this episode can be described as good, but disappointing. Actually, honestly, there was stuff about it that was even great, but it was still disappointing. Probably the most disappointing episode of the entire series. But I don't let disappointment ruin the episode for me, because that would be unfair, that would be biased, that would be, you know, that's not fair, right? Having high expectations does not mean I have to absolutely hate the episode when it doesn't live up to those expectations. But I can't lie, it was probably the most frustrating episode of the entire series, because I was expecting some awesome stuff. We had to wait a long time for it. I was expecting some big battle like the Whisper War in the comics. I was expecting a really awesome Negan versus Beta fight. But instead we get the characters leaving the hospital, fighting a couple Whispers on the road, and then a really cool scene with them leading the walkers off a cliff. But I mean, there was no battle. There was no Negan versus Beta. How do you not do Negan versus Beta? I don't get it. But the episode still gets to this point here because there was some great stuff there. Like I said, the scene where they were, Carol was bringing the walkers off the cliff was really beautifully done. It was got a really good soundtrack to it, beautifully directed. So that was all good. Maggie returns, which is pretty exciting. That scene with Gabriel taking on the Whisperers was pretty cool. The scene where they were walking through the Whisperer herd was also pretty cool. It was kind of reminiscent of No Way Out. I enjoyed that. But that's really it. Those things definitely hold up the episode to a higher standard for me, but not having a battle, not having Negan vs. Beta, that all holds it down. This could have been like a top 5 episode of all time if it just did what it should have done, but instead it's like maybe in the top 50 episodes, maybe top 60 at most. So, but for this specific season, it's number 10 because it did have some really cool stuff there that I really liked, especially the Carol and Lydia stuff. It's probably my favorite stuff of the episode. But why didn't you give us Negan vs. Beta, man? Why? I don't get it, man. But coming number 9 spot, I've got episode 14, which was titled Look at the Flowers. So this one, again, had some really stupid Carol getting hallucinations. Not really hallucinations. I think Alpha was just in her mind, kind of, and she was talking to her. And she stupidly got stuff fell on her in a shed. I don't know. I didn't really care for that stuff, to be honest. But everything else about this episode, especially the Negan stuff, was pretty damn great. So we had Daryl finding Negan out there because obviously Daryl was looking for him because, you know, he was gone because Carol let him go. And he finds him, and they have this really awesome scene where they come across Whispers, and they kneel down to to Negan as the new Alpha. That scene was awesome. And then when Negan takes the shotgun, and he just, and then they fight the Whispers. Great scene, great scene. Negan and Daryl even have a little conversation there going, you know, later on in the episode. I really enjoyed all of that, and I would say definitely holds the episode to being much better than I'd probably rate it otherwise. So that's awesome. You also had some other general stuff happening this episode, specifically with Eugene, Yumiko, and what was it, Ezekiel going to find their way to these the Sarah. Is her name Sarah? I don't remember the person's name. The person Eugene's speaking to on the thing. Oh, Stephanie. It was Stephanie. And they're going that way, and then they see Princess in the episode. So not too much stuff with that group, but they were still a portion of the episode, a portion of what was happening, and it was okay. But again, the episode was just carried this spot just because simply the stuff with Negan and Daryl, that's literally all I needed to see to enjoy it. You'll see going forward, a lot of the episodes up here are mainly Negan-centric episodes, so yeah, you guys probably know who one of my favorite characters is. He's probably, I don't know if this gives it away either, but it might. I don't know. But number 8, we've got episode 6, which was titled Bonds. So this was another Negan-centric episode. This was the one where he came to the Whispers for the first time, and he kind of had a lot of scenes with Beta in this one. He didn't really speak with Alpha in the episode until the very end. He was just kind of doing activities and chores with Beta, which I was really excited for this stuff. This was some of the stuff I was most anticipated for when it comes to the Whisper arc, which I feel like they did a decent job with this Negan Whisper stuff, but not a great job, mainly because they didn't give us that payoff with the Negan versus Beta. And this episode honestly would be higher if they did give us a Negan versus Beta, because I think it would have been more meaningful. But because they didn't do that, it's not as meaningful to me. It's really not. But still some great scenes there between those characters, which I do have to say I appreciated. But the other stuff in this episode was also pretty damn good too. You had Eugene speaking to Stephanie on the radio, which was interesting because you started to learn about what her community was all about just a little bit. They didn't go in depth yet until later on, but for what they had here, I definitely enjoyed it. And then you also had Daryl and Carol going out on this little mission, and they end up finding actually some whispers, and they had that really cool scene where Daryl was hiding behind and he like snapped the walker's neck. He hid behind a tree from a bunch of whispers, and he like snapped the walker's neck and was putting the blood on him. Really cool scene. And then you also had a really cool scene in Alexandria with the whole sickness going on, because obviously the water was poisoned, or not really poisoned, but you know, dirty, gross water was making everyone sick. That stuff was pretty cool. So this episode just had a lot of stories going on at once, which is kind of the type of episodes I usually like, because it's not just focusing and just soloing on one specific story. No, it's kind of branching out to a bunch of different things going on, and that's the way episodes should be to me. I don't really love when episodes bottle in on one story. Unless that one story is really great, then it's okay. But when it's got a bunch of different stories, it usually is pushing the story forward in a positive direction. So this episode definitely succeeded there. In the number 7 spot, I've got episode 10, which was titled Stalker. So this episode I was also a little disappointed by, because people were hyping it up like crazy. I still loved it, definitely, but I don't think it was nearly as good as people were hyping it up to be, especially with the whole Beta going to Alexandria and killing a bunch of Alexandrians. I was hoping for some much more Michael Myers type stuff going on here, but it kind of ended up being a little weird. They had one shot where he went into some Alexandrian's house and killed most of them off screen, which off screen kills bother the shit out of me. Like, come on, this isn't the 1980s with Friday the 13th, because those movies were notorious for doing off screen kills. No, we're in the 2000s now. Like, give us some cool on screen kills. I wish we could have seen Beta actually going in and killing more Alexandrians. I think it would have been a much more intense, scary thing. And then he just gets kind of defeated by Judith, but then he comes back and he kind of kicks Rosita's ass, but then he gets scared by Gamma, and then Laura gets killed, but off screen almost. Not really off screen, but in a really dumb way that you couldn't even tell what happened. You don't even know she died in that moment. That was dumb to me. I don't know. I just didn't love that stuff, even though it was nice that it happened. It was just weird. And it was also weird how he came out of the ground. That still makes zero sense, but whatever. But the stuff I loved was the Daryl and Alpha stuff. Now, they had a weird fight scene that was awkwardly shot, but it came to some really cool stuff later on where Daryl got stabbed in the leg, and then he was kind of like almost on the verge of death. This is kind of what I wanted from Daryl versus Beta last season. Although I loved that fight, I thought that fight wasn't brutal enough. I thought it wasn't as intense because there wasn't many stakes on the line. They were kind of just fighting each other. No one really got injured in a massive way. But when knives go in legs and it looks like this man might die, that makes it more intense. Obviously, I don't think Daryl's gonna die, but it still has that tension there. And he pulls out the knife when the walkers come and stabs him. That was a really cool sequence as well. And they have some cool conversations back and forth. And Lydia comes in and talks to Alpha. I actually thought Alpha was gonna die for a little bit there, but she didn't, of course. And I liked all that. I think this episode had a lot of solid stuff there. It wasn't perfect, definitely not even close to being perfect, but the stuff that it did have there was pretty great. And Gabriel was pretty much a badass in this episode, especially when he was going out with the shotgun. That was cool, but they didn't do many things with him. But the one scene where he was there and he was using the shotgun was pretty damn cool, I gotta say. So I definitely appreciated that. And let's get into the number 6 spot, episode 4, Silence the Whispers. This is probably much higher on my list than it is for most people. I think I just really liked the whole Negan conflict in the episode, where they were kind of deciding what the hell do they do with Negan, because Negan accidentally killed someone when they were attacking, I believe they were attacking Lydia, and he killed them. Didn't really mean to, he just kind of pushed them out of the way, and he ended up killing them. I really liked that. Really liked how they had Negan save Lydia's life, and then that kind of shed a new light on Negan's character for a little bit. But it was really cool how it played out because they were kind of all deciding what the hell do we do with Negan, and then at the end of the episode he ends up escaping. We don't really know how he escaped. Obviously we find out later on, but at the time we didn't know. A lot of people were assuming it was Brandon, a lot of people were assuming it was Lydia, a lot of people were assuming it was a bunch of different characters. Ended up being Carol, of course, but for what it was at that moment, I enjoyed it. And then you also had some stuff at the Hilltop going on with the whole herd attacking Hilltop, which was pretty cool as well. And they have that really cool scene where Michonne comes with Judith and they kind of save Hilltop, but again, they skip over all the Walker action. Like, why? They showed like a couple kills and they skip over it. Would have been cooler if we saw a little bit more than that. But another big part of the episode was actually Michonne seeing Ezekiel thinking about jumping off a cliff. Now, obviously, he was talking to her and he kind of said he doesn't really know what he was going to do out here. He doesn't know what he was deciding, but it really does break your heart, though, because, you know, he lost his son, basically, and it's just sad, and he doesn't know what he wants to do anymore. He's kind of lost his relationship with Carol, too, and now he knows he has cancer and everything, so it was a pretty intense scene, especially, and then when they kissed, that was a weird thing how they kissed, but I thought it worked. And they had a clever line where it's like maybe in another universe we'd be, you know, dating, and in the comics they actually did. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, pretty solid episode, mainly for the Negan stuff, but again, there was some other great stuff there as well. And the number 5 spots, we are now in the top 5. This is going to be episode 13, What We Become. This was Michonne's final episode, at least for now. I'm sure she'll probably come back for the movies or season 11 at some point. I'm not too sure. They did some really cool stuff with this episode that feels weird, but I still liked it. So, I didn't love the stuff with Virgil's character, but the stuff when Michonne was kind of like drugged and she went on this long-ass trip of like basically seeing another universe of her being Michonne as this savior character, being a villain, it had some deep, meaningful thoughts to it. It definitely felt like fanficky-ish, but it was still cool. I thought it was still cool to see it, especially to see the lineup again, to see Rick there. The music was fantastic. Some of the best music of the entire franchise in this episode. And then we get to the stuff on the boat later on where Michonne finds Rick's boots, and then that's where this episode became one of the best because we were getting excited. We finally got confirmation that Rick is still out there, and Michonne will likely find him. And this is going to all lead likely to the movies. So this was a big like lead up to sort of an episode where it was kind of just getting you hyped for what's to come later on. I like that. I like that a lot. Michonne's a great character. Michonne was always going to be fun to watch in my opinion. Could they have done a little bit more with this episode? They could always do more with every episode. But I think for what they did, I enjoyed it. And then they had that nice talk with Judith at the end of the episode. And that was a really heartfelt scene as well. So yeah, this episode's always going to be up there as one of the best of season 10 just because of a lot of the stuff going on here. In the number 4 spot, I've got episode 5, which was titled What It Always Is. Again, Negan-centric episode, so of course I'm going to love it. Negan was just, oh my god. He had some really cool scenes. Obviously, this was the big Brandon episode that we were all kind of anticipating to see with, you know, Brandon letting Negan go. We all assumed based on the comics that Negan probably was going to kill Brandon, but we didn't know how. And they had some really cool stuff with Negan coming across this family, this mom and this son, and kind of relating to the kid because obviously we know Negan likes kids. So him relating to the kid, kind of not really relating, but just bonding, I guess, talking to the kid was really awesome. And then seeing Brandon kill the two of them is just sickening. And then seeing Negan kill him was one of the most satisfying things of this entire franchise. So I definitely loved the episode for that alone. Honestly, that's all you needed for this episode to be fantastic, was just that alone. And it gets a lot of credit for me. You also had some stuff at the Hilltop going down. We learned that obviously Ezekiel has the cancer in this episode. That's what we learned. And it was definitely like a weird scene because we didn't really know that he had that in the prior episode. But that kind of makes more sense now because it's like, oh, shit, I guess that's kind of why he's thinking this way because there's another problem with him that's going on now, you know? So it definitely added a lot of oomph to the prior episode after seeing this one, so I like that a lot. But again, it's all I needed for this episode to be great was the Negan stuff. That's really all I needed. and that's really all I wanted when I went into it, so it ended up being one of my favorites of the season. And then we're gonna get to the top 3, episode 12, Walk With Us. So, Walk With Us is an episode just like the finale that disappointed me. It did, I'll be honest, it disappointed me. Things can still be disappointing, but still be goddamn fantastic, and this was one of those episodes. I don't know if I would say fantastic. I think it was a pretty great episode. I think only the top 2 are fantastic. This one's just like pretty great. So why didn't I like it as much as I feel like most people did? Because I do feel like most people like this episode a lot more than I did, for sure. Let me explain. So first of all, the prior episode led on this really awesome battle that was going on, and it kind of made us believe that this next episode was going to be mostly battle. We were all really excited for that, but the battle was summed up within like 3 or 4 minutes in the opening minutes. That's not a good idea, in my opinion. They should have made it last a little bit longer, have more walkers coming, more whispers coming, make it be a little bit bigger of an event, and that could have excited a lot more fans if it went on for a little bit longer. Because once you ended that cool, because it was a cool battle, I'll say, for the most part. Not everything about it was amazing, but some of it was pretty cool. But once you end that, and then you move on to having the rest of the stuff in the episode, pretty much everything after the battle and before the last 10 minutes of the episode wasn't that great. Like, I didn't really care for the stuff in the middle of the episode. You had stuff with Aladdin and Gamma and Kelly, and then Gamma dies in a really stupid way. I still don't know what the point of killing her off was. I don't really know what it did for the story, but whatever. They kill her off, and Aladdin, for some reason, doesn't shoot Beta, shoots Gamma instead. I don't know. That was a weird scene. Then you had Eugene, Carol talking, which was kind of cool because they really never talked to each other, so that was a kind of cool scene. But you had some stuff with those characters talking, just a lot of dialogue going on, which was character developing dialogue, sure, but not the most meaningful stuff ever. I loved the stuff with Judith, and I believe the character's name was, what the hell was the guy's name? I forget the blacksmith's name. Tammy Rose's husband, Earl was his name. He was bitten, of course, and then he had to basically kill himself, and had this really nice talk with Judith. That was a really heartfelt scene. I love that scene a lot, but that's really it. Then you get to the last 5 minutes of the episode. The last 5 minutes is fantastic. Really great build up to this big reveal that, you know, Negan was leading Alpha to the wrong place. It was kind of weird because it was made to be really... It was made to seem like it was going to be Lydia in there, but I still don't know what was the point of doing that. You could have killed her at any other moment, like when they were kissing. He could have just stabbed her when they were kissing. Like, why do we need to wait for her to open up the shed to do it? I don't know. It didn't really seem like a necessity. I guess he was just taking his sweet ass time because he wanted it to be perfect. I don't know, but I'm sure he could have done it in many other moments other than waiting for her to open up a shed. They did it for the audience, obviously, because they wanted us to think that Lydia was in that shed. I get it, but it was just weirdly done. But I do love the fact, obviously, that we got this awesome comic book moment. We were all expecting it, and then giving the head to Carol was a cool reveal. So the opening minutes, that last scene, and of course the stuff with Judith and Earl is what pushes this episode to the top 3. Everything else, didn't care for. I thought it was kind of disappointing, but still gonna be one of the top episodes of season 10 for sure. So, top 2. These 2 episodes I love. Outstanding episodes, some of the best of the franchise, probably within my top 25 favorite episodes of the whole series. Only these 2. The rest of the episodes this season are just either great or below that. You know what I mean? They're not fantastic. They're not top of the line. Number 2 is going to be episode 11, Morning Star. This episode is really underrated. Everyone gives 12 more praise than 11, probably because bigger things happen, because you have Alpha dying, you have, you know, Hilltop falling. But 11 was just so much better. I don't really know how I could ever convince myself that 12, but 11 had so much more to it. So for starters, some of the best dialogue in the entire franchise. Easily some of the best dialogue. Between multiple characters. You had Lydia talking to Carol. You had Eugene talking to Rosita. You had Daryl talking to Judith. You had Daryl talking to Ezekiel. You had Eugene talking to Rosita. Or I already said that. Whatever. You had a lot of good conversations. Oh, Alden had some good scenes with Gamma not wanting to accept Gamma being there. A lot of just intense drama going on, like almost season 2 like. Season 2 had a lot of dialogue that was really good because it was like drama that wasn't necessarily focused around action. It was focused around internal group conflicts. This episode had so much of that, and it was all centered around Hilltop because all the characters, or not all of them, but most of them were at Hilltop because of, you know, obvious reasons, because it was getting attacked. They knew the attack was coming. They're all getting prepared for it. And the scene where they're all preparing for this big incoming attack was just fantastic. You had some cool stuff with Negan with the mask, with the Whisperer mask. That was all great. And then the last 10 minutes of the episode is a masterpiece, I gotta say. From when Daryl starts talking to Ezekiel and that music starts playing, that really good soundtrack this episode has, and then you see the scene where Daryl's talking to Ezekiel, which is really great, and then Judith, and then he talks to Carol, and he tells Carol he's never gonna hate her, and then Daryl walks out. A lot of good slow-mo shots too. Whoever directed this episode did a fantastic job. Daryl walks out, picks up the Morning Star, goes to the Walker herd, starts swinging at the walkers. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. And then the Whisperers attack with the flaming arrows. It could have been cooler if it was a little bit longer, for sure. But for the way it was, I enjoyed it. Loved this episode. It's got to be the number 2. But number one. Y'all already know. Here's Negan, the finale, the actual full-on bonus episode finale, episode 22. Here's Negan. Oof, it was so good. It was so good. Now, it wasn't perfect. I already talked about this in my review. There's a few flaws I have. Because it's a bonus episode and it was filmed during COVID, there were some restrictions that they had. For sure, there was less people that I feel like made the episode feel a little bit smaller scale. You had a couple of scenes where they skipped over some things that I would have liked to have seen, like when Negan was killing some of those bikers. Skipped over it because COVID, they didn't want to spend time doing all that. That's fair. But the story, specifically with Negan's character and his kind of redemption, and the story with Lucille and how he went from being this douchebag who really just did not care about his wife that much, but still kind of loved her in a way, and was cheating on her and such. And then once he finds out she has cancer, he just devotes his entire life to taking care of her, and that was really meaningful. And then once he loses that because of some assholes out there, that's what changes him into becoming the Negan he becomes later on. I would love to see more, though. I get why they didn't show more than that. I get why we didn't see the entirety of Here's Negan. But could we please get some more Here's Negan? Could we please, like, they need to do a mini-series. I'm talking a 6-episode mini-series of his build-up to becoming the Negan we see in Season 7. Because they didn't really show that, because they didn't have time to show that. It was mainly just the start of the apocalypse. But for what it was, phenomenal acting, phenomenal music, phenomenal shots, directing, all that was just beautiful. Such a well done episode. It's not in my top 10 favorite of all time. Unfortunately, season 10 did not get any episodes that are in that top 10. It's just the way it is, but definitely within the top 15 at least. It's just that good. It's just that good. Jeffrey Morgan and Hillary Burton Morgan put on a fantastic performance. Made me tear up, bro. It did. If you want to see my reaction to the episode, go check it out. It's still on my channel. Had a great time watching it, and I'm really excited for Season 11 because it sounds like it's going to be a lot bigger than Season 10. It's going to have a lot more stuff to it with Commonwealth and stuff. I just hope they do some interesting stuff with it. I hope there's a lot of good action. I hope there's a lot of big stuff happening. I hope they do some good character stuff. I hope we get some characters returning, like Rick and Michonne at some point. Don't know, but I'm excited. Hopefully you guys are too. Let me know your lists in the comment section below, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.